Welcome in to Fantasy 15, a podcast meant to answer all of your fantasy football questions, or as many as I can get to in 15 minutes. I'm your host, Zach Freed. Today we're getting into rookie rankings after the draft. We're going to look at where guys landed and where we think that puts them as far as overall rookie rankings go. This is primarily going to be a dynasty-centered show because most of the rookies that we're talking about aren't going to be super relevant for redraft, at least right away. Typically, you want to wait until about halfway through the season before you really jump all over a rookie unless they're just a smash play coming right out of the gates. As always, if you like what you hear today, subscribe, rate, review, share, follow on Twitter at Fantasy15, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Fantasy15, and submit any questions to Fantasy15@gmail.com. Let's get into today's show. We're going to start by going through tier rankings, and I'll go position by position. At quarterback, my tier 1 rankings are Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. That's just the only guys I really put on tier 1 because I think they're guaranteed starters, and I think there is very little bust potential. I really flirted with the idea here of putting Tua ahead of Burrow just because Burrow kind of was this one season wonder. I wouldn't be shocked if he turned out to be a bust. I don't think he's going to be because he did produce very well in college and there aren't a lot of holes to his game. But the fact that his stats, his very impressive stats, are centered around one particular season does give me a little bit of pause. And Tua has that injury, so I kept him behind Burrow. My tier 2 quarterback is Justin Herbert. He's the only one on tier 2 because I think out of the quarterbacks that were drafted, besides Burrow and Tua, Herbert has a chance to come in and start year 1. The rest of the guys that were drafted, I don't think really have that possibility. Again, he could be a bust. He fits that kind of Mitch Trubisky stature where he's just like a tall, not super mobile guy, kind of athletic, can throw the ball really deep, but didn't have a ton of success in college. I still put him as a tier 2 guy because he's going to get a lot more opportunity than the next guys I'm talking about. My tier 3 quarterbacks, which is my last tier of quarterbacks, are Jacob Eason, Jalen Hurts, and Jordan Love. And I put Eason first on this list because I think there's a very clear path to him starting. It's not going to be right away, but once Phillip Rivers retires, I think Eason comes in and takes over that offense, and he's going to be playing behind a very solid offensive line. With Hurts, I originally would have put him at the top of this tier, but since he went to the Eagles, I don't really understand what his position is going to be. I don't really understand how he's going to be used. I don't think they're going to be moving away from Wentz. And then Jordan Love, you got to put him on the list because he is the heir to the throne in Green Bay. It's just a matter of time before that happens. That's it. I didn't put any quarterbacks besides those 6 guys on the list because I think the rest of them are pretty irrelevant. I think the rest of them are going to be backups that maybe stumble into a starting job, but they're not guaranteed anything. Let's move on to running backs. My tier 1 guys are Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I put Taylor over Helaire, which is kind of controversial. A lot of people think Edwards-Helaire has that guaranteed passing role out of the Chiefs offense, and I understand where people are coming from, but I love the idea of Jonathan Taylor behind that Colts offensive line. His running style really fits it well. My tier 2 running back is J.K. Dobbins, and he's on a tier by himself because it's clear what the Ravens want to do with him. They want to bring him in. He's a read option kind of runner. He did that at Ohio State, did it very well at Ohio State. He's tier 2 instead of tier 1 to me because I don't think he has a guaranteed role year 1. Mark Ingram still being there gives me a little bit of pause with Dobbins, so I don't know exactly how he's going to be used his rookie season, but going forward, I expect him to do great things. Tier 3, we're looking at DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, and Keyshawn Vaughn. Swift is, I honestly thought about moving him up to tier 2 because he definitely, out of those 3 guys, I think has the best opportunity to become a workhorse. he could take over. Kerryon Johnson has definitely been an injury-prone guy. He's suffered through, not even made it through an entire season. So I wouldn't be shocked if he became kind of the bell cow in that offense. Cam Akers didn't produce really at Florida State. A lot of people blame the offensive line for that. Well, lucky him. He went to the Rams, who also don't have a great offensive line. So he's kind of used to that situation right now. We don't know exactly if he's just going to come in and inherit the Todd Gurley role. If he does, he would definitely move up my list. But just the unknown with him, it kind of gives me a little pause. I'm not ready to move him up. And then Keyshawn Vaughn, he's could be the guy for the Bucs. He could be the check down guy in the Tom Brady offense, fill that James White role, and if he does that, he's definitely going to be a fantasy relevant guy. The worry there with Vaughn is that Bruce Arians has a tendency to not trust rookies right away, mostly because of blitz pickup in the passing game. And if Vaughn messes up and Brady takes a hit, it could be weeks before Vaughn sees the field again. So he's probably the most dangerous guy in that tier, but he also has kind of some boom potential as a receiver out of the backfield. My tier 4 running backs are Antonio Gibson, A.J. Dillon, Zack Moss, Anthony McFarland, and Joshua Kelly. I really like Antonio Gibson. The more I see about him, the more I just kind of fall in love with him. He's kind of a hybrid running back receiver type. It was kind of unclear what position he was going to be when he came into the league. The Redskins, though, seem to have designated him as a running back. So I think it could be very interesting. He's going to be more of a change of pace guy. They're going to give Darius Geis the ball to start. Who knows how far he'll make it into the season, but Antonio Gibson could become the guy in Washington if Geis can't make it through. A.J. Dillon is somebody to watch. I don't think he's necessarily going to come in and dethrone Aaron Jones right away, but I do think he will take on that Jamal Williams role, and he could be better at it. He's definitely a pound the rock guy. He's like a miniature version of Derrick Henry. Definitely see what Green Bay is going for. They went out and got a fullback as well. So going forward beyond next season, Dillon could be a guy that would be very interesting in the more of a power run offense for Green Bay. Zack Moss is the third tier 4 guy. He's with the Bills. I don't expect him to take a bunch of work from Singletary, but he could be a complimentary back, like a first, second down guy. My worry with him is that he doesn't have a ton of breakaway speed. He's more of a plotter. Anthony McFarland is with the Steelers. The Steelers typically use one guy. They typically use a workhorse. So if he gets that opportunity, he could be great for fantasy. And Joshua Kelly, he's going to probably end up being the first and second down back, filling the Melvin Gordon role on that Chargers offense. So that could be great, depending on how good that Chargers offense is. If they're constantly trailing because their offense is no good, he's not going to get a ton of work. Didn't get a ton of receiving work in college, but from what I've heard, that's not necessarily because he couldn't do it. It's because they were giving him more of a blow on those types of plays. And then my tier 5 running backs are DeeJay Dallas, Darrynton Evans, Lynn Bowden Jr., and Lamichael Perine. DeeJay Dallas is in Seattle. He's probably going to inherit things after Chris Carson leaves. That could be as early as next year. So I think he's a guy to wait on, as many of these tier 5 guys are. Darrynton Evans is in a similar position. He's going to fill that pass catching role in the Titans backfield. Who knows how well he's going to fill that role, and he could inherit more work if Derrick Henry kind of starts to break down because of that big season he had last year. And then going forward, if Derrick Henry doesn't come back, Evans could inherit the entire backfield. Bowden Jr. is probably going to be a receiving back more than anything. The Raiders just drafted Josh Jacobs last year, so I don't think he's going to come in and dethrone him. And then Perine is an interesting guy if you want to hold on to. The Jets are rumored to probably drop Le'Veon Bell after next season, and if that's the case, Perine could be the guy who just takes over that entire backfield. He does play in an Adam Gase offense, so I'm not crazy about it, but he's a guy to definitely watch. Looking at wide receivers, my tier 1 guys are CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those guys. They didn't have great landing spots, but I think Lamb is going to do a lot more damage in Dallas than people realize. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Jeudy leads the Broncos in targets this year. My tier 2 guys are Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and Jalen Reagor. I think Jefferson might end up scoring the most fantasy points, especially in PPR formats. He's going to come in and fill that Diggs role. And Adam Thielen struggled through last season, so Jefferson could be the wide receiver 1 for the Vikings before it's all said and done. T. Higgins I like as a big body coming in, pairing up with Joe Burrow right from the beginning. He's going to fill kind of that A.J. Green role. As long as A.J. Green's in town, though, I think it's going to be tough sledding for him. Jalen Reagor is a guy that I'm a little bit lower on than most people. He's going to come into the Eagles offense, which was hurting for wide receiver talent last year. I just am not 100% sold on him yet. He's kind of a slot guy, kind of a speed guy. But he does have some highlight reel plays. I just don't know if I trust him. My tier 3 guys are Henry Ruggs III, Michael Pittman Jr., Denzel Mims, Laviska Shenault, and Brandon Aiyuk. They're on this tier 3 because I think there's some bust potential with these guys. Ruggs is obviously crazy athletic, crazy speed, but there's a lot of guys that have come into the NFL with speed like him and just completely fizzled out. The obvious comp is Darius Hayward-Bay because he went to the Raiders. Ruggs is faster than him, but I think Ruggs is going to be a lot better for his NFL team than he will actually be for fantasy. Pittman Jr. is somebody who's interesting to watch because he could become the guy for the Colts, similar to Higgins and Burrow kind of coming into the league together. Watching Pittman and Eason kind of form a relationship might be interesting. He could be a guy to watch down the road. Denzel Mims, I really like with the Jets because they're just hurting for wide receiver talent. I don't know what kind of opportunity Mims gets, though, because he's playing for Adam Gase, and I could see Adam Gase making him sit solely on the fact that he's a rookie. Shenault is interesting as well. If he can stay healthy, he could be great for the Jaguars. He could really turn any play into a big kind of scoring play. So he's somebody to watch. I've heard that they're also going to try to use him as like a wildcat quarterback and even as running back sometimes. So he could have a lot of opportunity, get a lot of touches. Brandon Aiyuk is somebody that I think I'm a little bit lower on than most people because I think the 49ers have a lot more wide receiver talent than people realize. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him. My tier 4 receivers are Chase Claypool, Devin Devurnay, Bryan Edwards, KJ Hamler, Van Jefferson, and Tyler Johnson. And these are guys that I think could really become something if things fall the right way. Obviously, Claypool went to the Steelers. The Steelers, people think of wide receiver talent. If he can really become that Calvin Johnson comp that he was getting after the combine, he's a lottery ticket that is going to cash in big where you're probably going to be able to draft him. Devurnay, I'm interested in solely on the fact that the Ravens were pumped when they got him. They took him, I think, in the second round, which seemed a little bit early. Edwards is a great route runner, not a guy that's going to blow you away with his athleticism, but he could be a great possession receiver for the Raiders. KJ Hamler is kind of the poor man's Henry Ruggs. Didn't get to see him run the 40, but his speed is supposedly as good, if not better. So he's a guy to watch in Denver. I don't think he'll have a ton of fantasy relevance, but he could be kind of a nice piece in best ball leagues. Van Jefferson is probably the most polished receiver in the entire class because his dad is a wide receiver coach in the NFL. The thing that's going to hold him back is his actual athleticism. Tyler Johnson is interesting because he went to the Bucs. He doesn't necessarily have a role, doesn't necessarily have a clear path to fantasy relevance, but he could possibly be one of the more talented guys in this class because of what he was doing at Minnesota. And then my tier 5 receivers are Antonio Gandy-Golden and Donovan Peoples-Jones. And these are two just big body guys that if they get the right opportunity, they could become something. Gandy-Golden with the Redskins has a little bit more of a clear path than Peoples-Jones does with the Browns. And then tight ends, I'm pretty thin there. I only ranked 3 guys. My tier 1 tight end is Cole Kmet going to the Bears. If he can take over that Bears tight end role, that's big points. And then my tier 2 guys are Adam Troutman and Devin Asiasi, 2 guys that I think are worth investing in because the teams they play for have great usage of the tight end and are pretty good at developing talent. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening. As always, subscribe, rate, and review, share, follow on Twitter @Fantasy15, follow on Facebook @Facebook.com/Fantasy15, and submit any questions you have to Fantasy15@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel